So now this would be one more panel discussion that shall be coming up in front of us. And for the same, I would like to introduce our moderator, Mr. Tanmay Agarwal, VP and Head Global People Operations, Wipro, who shall be discussing on the topic with the panelists, captive versus outsourced BPO, strategic choices for business growth. Mr. Tanmay is a dynamic business leader with 25 years of cross-functional experience spanning supply chain, finance, commercial and business head roles, all with P&L responsibility. His career is defined by a relentless pursuit of excellence, visionary thinking and a passion for driving change. He thrives on pioneering initiatives that elevate processes through operational rigor, strategic influence, and team alignment. His specialties are strong business acumen and leadership, end-to-end supply chain, financial management, and commercial skills. Tanmay is deeply committed to growth and transformation, consistently setting business ambition goals and achieving them through focused drive. Team leadership and alignment is his key ones. He is entrepreneurially minded, adept at identifying major opportunities and acting decisively to convert them into significant long-term business benefits. So, the panelists are as follows: Joshua Sanath, Director and Head Content Design and Experience and Training, MIS Global BPO 24/7 AI. Mr. Robert Adair-Major, Managing Director, Middle East India Operations, State Street. Mr. Sathish Jampale, Associate VP Solutions, Digital Business Services, Sutherland. Steve Ernest, Senior Vice President, India International Operations, Startek. Ms. Noor, Saba, Head General Manager, BPO Operations, IGT Solutions. And last but definitely not the least, Mr. Kartick Krishnamurthy, Senior Vice President, Operations, Teleperformance. Can we all put our hands together and welcome our moderator and panelists for the session.
Good afternoon, good evening. Last session for the day. The last panel discussion for the day. Yeah, there are no more sessions after this. And I think someone said, yeah, the best for the last. Let's prove the best for the last. Okay, so before I start, I just want to give a disclaimer on all our behalf. Those on the stage representing various companies. All the views that we present here are our own and not something which is specific to the company that we work for. Yeah, so that's just a disclaimer. Now, anyone in the audience who is on the journey to start a captive or trying to decide whether I should outsource, should I do a captive, or has a combination of both but is trying to figure out, am I in the right boat? Am I managing it right? Anyone who's in that part of the journey, because the session is going to be relevant for organizations in that space. Okay, there's one or two. Yeah, but I'm sure, whichever organizations you're part of, there is a combination of always, in manufacturing we call it buy versus sell, outsource versus do it ourselves, and various things. So I'll just set the context of this discussion. And there's quite a bit of experience that we have on the stage, and I'm privileged to be with this group and panel, which is like, I think collectively, more than 120 plus years of experience that you see on the stage. So I'm sure you will go back thinking that, yeah, what is the right way forward, and what's the right balance going forward. Now, between morning and now, I'm sure there is some GCC, which is the equivalent of a captive, that's set up somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised if a GCC has come up in the last 8-10 hours of today. That's the pace at which the GCC market is growing. There are about 2,000 odd GCCs in India, 2 million people, I think someone called out this morning. And it's almost $65 billion plus of revenue, which is going up to almost 1% and 2%. And if you actually see the print media today, and I'm surprised, in the last 2-3 years, the print space just for GCCs is like immense. I mean, there's one page full every Wednesday and Friday, I think, on Times of India, which is dedicated to GCCs. So that's where the captive story is going. There are stories of companies who had outsourced and are now setting up their own captives, taking back work, insourcing. So we will talk about that. And on the other hand, if you see, and also GCCs are doing cutting edge work with all the partner ecosystem, and some of them we heard today, largely on contact center, but across the board, the partner ecosystem is so strong, whether academia, whether startups, whether established players, the GCCs can, or captives can, do a good job. Now on the flip side, you have large outsourcing service providers, the Infosys, and we had someone from Infi, we had Capgemini, just in the last session. We have TCS, and of course, I represent Wipro. And these companies are also doing a lot in terms of the IT services, BPS services, or BPM services. So that space is also growing. Now, in this scenario, as an organization, the discussion is going to be about what's the right balance, what's the right way forward, as we discuss with the panel here. All right, so first question to Robert, and Robert, you may also introduce yourself, that you've been, and almost all of the panel that you see here has been part of both captives and outsourced service providers. They are doing outsourcing or, as a captive doing work. I myself represent Wipro. I run the captive for Wipro, but Wipro as a company runs outsourcing services. So we have like both sides of the coin that we can talk through. So Robert, you've looked at various models. You set up, outsourcing services as for your company, State Street, and what is your view, whether it's JVs, whether it is advisory, whether it is set up a captive? How would you, what is your experience about all of this?
Yeah, thanks, Tanmay. So I think from my perspective, and I think I come from a different frame of reference than most of the panel, so let's just start there. I've been on the side of the water where we've sent business to our joint venture partners. So my firm set up its first joint venture over 20 years ago here in India to leverage some of the benefits that we see from an outsourced operations. And in doing so, we realigned and rebuilt effectively our operating model, leveraging a hub location supported by other sites globally. Now, over that last 20 years, we picked up a second joint venture. We also built a captive here starting in Bangalore, but also Hyderabad and Mumbai. And in the last 24 to 30 months, we've been working on consolidating that picture and effectively buying out both of the joint ventures that serviced us previously. In doing so, and that wasn't a decision that was taken lightly. In doing so, that provided us with a level of control and a level of ownership and accountability that we were then able to impart upon all of our colleagues and staff who we brought in as part of those deals. That said, I'm not going to sit here and tell everyone that captive is the way to go. I think realistically, we were in a position, we were in a maturity, and we had the investment and the buy-in throughout our organization to make that move. I think to make the right call, you have to look at what you want to get out of the operations, what you want to get out of the part of the organization here in India. You want to look at how willing you are to properly fund it. There's no point in saying you're going to spin up a captive and then expect that you're going to be able to hire at the same rate and the same success as a Wipro, as a TCS. You've got to make sure you invest in local technology, local policies and processes, local training programs, and effectively buy into local culture. Otherwise, you're never going to be successful. So realistically, that's a very long-winded way of saying there isn't a right answer. That you need to evaluate what the right thing is for your firm. You need to identify how you can get to the journey that you want to get on. And sometimes that means that you take steps like a joint venture, like a build, operate, transform situation, so that you can end up the value chain, so you can end up in a higher maturity level, and ultimately you can make a success of your organization. Now, what I would say, and as a direct result of some of the decisions that we've taken, we are now, over the last 6 months, seeing global ownership being driven from our captive site here in India. We have leaders within our Indian operations who are responsible for the entire function around the world. We are seeing people in my team, reporting into me, who have direct reports in the US, in Europe. And that, I think, is a symptom of the decisions that we've made, but also where we are in that maturity curve.
So, Robert, if I were to just ask, what was that one key decision factor that made you move from a outsourced to back to a captive?
I think what we recognize, and I'm in the financial services business, for those who don't know State Street, we're an institutional financial service firm. And I think it was really a combination of needing to become the most client-centric organization that we can be. So realistically, cost is always important, obviously. Value is important, but also delivering the service that we need to our clients in a highly regulated, highly risk-sensitive environment is key. And we felt that we could best do that by having complete control over our operations here in India.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, let me just move to Sathish. So you run digital services for Sutherland, and you've been with TCS, which is like a large IT services company. One of the hypotheses, and we heard about how IBM this morning, they talked about Client Zero and how they're driving value. I know Wipro spends about $1 billion just on coaching people on AI. Now, in a captive versus a large IT services company, the hypothesis of driving digital transformation is better done by a large service provider like a Sutherland or a TCS versus a captive doing it themselves. What would be your view?
Firstly, thanks for the opportunity to gain a seat in this panel. Thank you very much for that. I think, Tanmay, it's a very interesting question and a very relevant question with the kind of global situation what we are right now. See, there is no right or wrong answer for that, whether it could be captive or whether it could be outsourcing. See, there are a couple of very basic factors which needs to be considered to take a decision. That is what I feel. It firstly depends on the nuts and bolts. So what is the risk appetite of the client? What is the kind of investment what they want to do? What is the kind of scalability they have in their mind? So whether it is a startup company, whether it is an established company, but it is not something that if it is an established company, they will be having huge pile of cash and they will be able to set up a captive, because captive as a beast requires a lot of investment. There is a time which is required to mature that organization. So that is the reason, as I said in the start, it is not one right or one wrong answer. It all depends. But nevertheless, when you take the advantages of the BPS, I'm not here to sell the BPS, but however, see, for a scale like an organization which is like 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion kind of a thing, so there is always a factor of investment, how much they want to do, and what is the kind of trajectory they have in their sales or in their revenue generation. So it might be good for them to start with the outsourcing provider. The only reason being is the advantages with which BPO service provider comes with that kind of a setup. Basically, they have a large talent pool, they have global networking delivery centers, and they need not worry on which part of the world they are servicing or which part of the world they are doing their business. So it could be, for example, if somebody is a European company but spread across like multiple 20, 30 countries, obviously a captive, when it is set up, they need to set up like 2 to 3 captives, because depending upon the language and how much is the language requirement for that particular business, they have to set up at least 2 to 3 different captives. So when they come to the BPS service provider, those risks or those facilities are already provided by the BPS services, because the BPS services comes with the different global networking delivery models, wherein the language is catered and the requirement of the nearshore presence is also taken care. So that being the case, I would suggest, or I would call out, it is all dependent on the client or the company to take the wise decision and the right decision, so that they generate the required value in the long run. So aligning it to transformation, I always feel that I have given some of the solutions from the GBS setup perspective also. The main pain point or the problematic statement what they give is, how will I transform my system within 6 to 12 months? See, how much ever we talk about Gen AI, the RPA, and the best of the platforms, it has its own maturity curve. So that being the case, when they actually come to the BPS service provider, those are like instant. Within 3 months, 6 months, at least they will be able to achieve their objectives to the tune of at least to the tune of 40-50%, which will actually give a labor arbitrage and the benefit for their investment in their organization, where the funds can be diversified. But the recent buzzword which is going on from the past 1 year is bot model, actually. The build, operate, and transfer model, that is gaining a lot of pace and a lot of interest. So I think within the two, that is also gaining traction, and the clients are coming back telling that we want to we want to have a bot model for 3 years, and then we want to absorb. So that means that they would have already assessed their risk, they would have already planned their investment. All those factors are taken into consideration, and they are coming for that kind of solution as well. So I think no right answer, no wrong answer. So whenever you people are in the solutions, or whenever you try to give the advice or representations from the company here, please take the right call with the right decision mindset, so that it is helpful both internally to the organization as well as from the service provider perspective. So that will be my answer. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sathish. I'll just carry on with Josh. So your organization in 24/7, right? Yeah. So you also have instances or examples where you have insourced work, right? You're also doing a lot of work around training and content creation for analytics in high-end work. How do you see that in a captive versus an outsourced environment from your organization's perspective?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? And it may be really highly hypocritical of me to actually talk about insourcing, considering 24/7 as an organization. While product is one part of it, the other part of it, where the main revenue stream is from outsourcing, right? But to actually take the decision of insourcing certain high-end jobs was a strategic decision that we had to take, and just not an operational call, right? And to take that decision, actually piggybacking on what Rob had mentioned earlier, there were certain key factors that we had to look at. One, or what is important for us to take the decision, one was speed, control, and value creation, right? When it comes to speed, going back to the first point that you mentioned, with the current business environment that we are in, especially in customer service and BPO, things are changing in incredible fast pace, right? So for us to actually manage that, we had to take the decision that there are certain key workspaces that we can insource, mainly being data science, automation development, and creating digital learning content, right? And that's purely because we had to respond to the client needs as fast as possible, be able to iterate things as easy as possible, and reduce all the back and forth that happens when we bring in an external vendor, right? Because at the end of the day, the idea was to reduce the innovation cycle, right? Shorten the innovation cycle so that the time it takes from idea to execution is as fast as possible, right? That's with the speed. Now, when it comes to control, when you're talking about digital transformation, especially at this huge scale, it's absolutely important that we have tight control on quality, data integrity, and security, right? So by completely owning this work end to end, we were able to completely align to our own business goals. We were able to have higher accountability and stronger governance, right? By doing this, we were able to take decisions more real time because the data was with us, and we were able to quickly adapt to our client needs as well as the changes that happens in technology. The last part, which is the value creation, right? So that's where it gets interesting because it all depends on you as an organization, what is your key values, right? What are you creating? So in our case, when we're talking about completely changing the learning content, right, make it experiential, we have to strip away all the traditional ways of learning. And we were able to do that, or rather create experiential, self-paced learning ecosystem only by realizing that we had decades of experience by training multiple clients, multiple domains, and multiple geographies. Right? We had that. We had that deep understanding of instruction design. We had understanding of what are the learner key points. So with that information, that tribal knowledge that was already existing, we were able to create that learning content which is more scalable, consistent, and data-driven, right? Because we didn't want to be a company which just had an AI as a suffix, right? Because using our AI models that we have, we're able to build learning simulation, training simulation, because that was another value creation that we had. So I'm not saying that it's easy, right? Insourcing is definitely not an easy job because along with cost, it also comes with a lot of investment with talent, investment to creating the infrastructure, upskilling your existing workforce. And most importantly, even the shift of the mindset of your senior leaders and your team members. But it was worth it, right? So in short, 3 things that is very important that we looked at before we start insourcing was how important is speed? Is speed very important? Do you need to have complete control of the processes? And what's the value that you already have, you're creating, and what you would like to create, right? Because at the end of the day, for all of us, it's about creating a customer-centric organization which is as agile as possible and intelligent, right? So that was our take.
Interesting. So I'll pass it on to Noor, you. And, so I'll put a contrarian view to what Josh just said. And he spoke about speed, control, and, value and transformation and all of that. And my belief is that, and he said that he did this because it was insourcing, and through insourcing, that in a captive, the rigor on SLAs, the commitment to clients as you would have in a BPM kind of or a BPS kind of an environment is far more because you are delivering to a contract versus an in-house, you're serving your own customers. And that's one. And then to drive speed and transformation, you need talent. Without talent and getting good talent and training that talent is not easy. So what is your view based on your experience having worked in both the environments of a captive and a BPM?
Thank you for the question, Tanmay. Out of the 17 years of work experience I have, a majority of my experience has been within the captive market, whereas the last couple of years within the BPO sector. In terms of attracting good talent and as well as retaining them, that becomes a challenge in both these segments. But what really works for captive market is you're pretty much there in the industry. You have gained that expertise. And when people are hired, they pretty much know what the next few years are going to be for you, how the growth mindset is going to be. You pretty much come with a mindset wanting a stable job, wanting to grow, and wanting to have a comfortable work-life balance, sorts of things. It does have good career prospects as well, and working for your own company, there's always a feel-good factor. So that kind of keeps driving people to continue doing better and keep growing in the organization. Whereas in terms of the BPO segment, it's all dependent on your client requirement. What works for them today may not necessarily work for them tomorrow. The kind of talent or skill that they could be looking for currently, again, may not necessarily work, in the later stage. But it also kind of creates that challenge and that ambitious, will to go and, get those skill set of people and get them on board, try and do a great job so that the client is happy and the progress and everything, it keeps going on. But at the same time, I think the BPO part of it also has its own uncertainties and a bit of unstable environment, because the client could be very happy. The next week they could come and give you, say, additional 100 head count, go ahead and hire and recruit people, and it will create more opportunities for the people in-house as well as the new set of people that are coming in. At the same time, at times a client is also having more than one vendor or a partner like us. So they may be happy with us, they may not necessarily be happy, or another project could go to someone else for the same exact process, for the same exact services. Maybe the other vendor partner is hiring for maybe a slightly higher pay. So the whole crowd that is pretty much working with you could get excited to move on and straight away go join to another organization, just for maybe, good work-life balance or maybe certain higher income and stuff like that. So these things definitely pose those, unstable or uncertainties. So it has both pros and cons. But having worked with both side of the segment, somewhere if somebody's looking for that stability and no job redundancy as such and stuff like that, captive definitely pays a good way there. Coming to the second part of the question, you asked about
control and
and accountability and management, right? I think when you're working for the captive segment, you pretty much own it. The rigor is definitely there. You drive everything by yourself. You're pretty much aware that the processes, product, services are pretty standard, not too many changes, so you very well know what really you're up for. When it comes to the BPO segment, you know that the client always has that upper hand, and as much as you are in control of it, there's definitely the second approval or a second line of control that always is into the consideration. In terms of the captive, you have your own rigor in terms of internal audits and have pretty much stable processes. It doesn't really kind of create any kind of chaotic situation. Circumstances are pretty much in control, whereas you never know what is going to happen within the BPO segment, because the client may have their own set of new policies or changes, and you need to implement that back at your own within the organization to run clients' requirements. The control, as much as you do all the work, at times it's always the second hand control that I can feel. I hope I have
So
answered.
you're an advocate of captive.
Well, majorly possibly, yeah.
I think that's the most fresh perspective. You can feel the change in her, right?
Yeah.
Captive to
Take
outsource.
a mic. Yeah. Okay. I'll move to Steve. And so you're part of also advisory services in Startek, consulting services, and you also do BPS services, right? So driving transformation is cost prohibitive, and to drive the value also requires infrastructure like Josh was mentioning, and it's not easy. So if an organization came to you for advice that I want to set up, tell me what's the way I should go, what would your key questions or suggestions be?
See, I think if we kind of look at both sides of the coin, in my view, in today's day and age, they are like co-joined twins, right? If I looked at the way the industry was maybe 10, 15 years ago, if you were outsourcing a business, the only expectation was that you meet a KPI and that's where it ends. Today, I think the expectation has grown significantly higher. A KPI is a given. right? What you expect from a particular company that you're working with is that the interaction is not necessarily just transactional, but it has to be strategic. In the sense, what kind of value you're bringing to the table. And all of our contracts, whenever we work for someone, all of our contracts, we do, we kind of talk to them, commercials, etc. But then we need to give them year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, what is it that we're bringing back to the table? How are we adding value to their business? How are we improving their cost structures? How are we, taking care of, the shift from them becoming a cost model to a profit center, right? I think that's where the focus predominantly is. So if you ask me, does it make sense for you to just be a captive, or does it make sense for you to just outsource certain things? I think it depends on, the priorities of the company, because everything can be outsourced at 40%, cheaper as compared to what you would do it by yourself. That's number one. Number two, for example, there's a particular client I work with. We outsource they outsource a good amount of work for us, and it's a pretty renowned technology brand which everyone is familiar with. Yet they came to me and they told me, I need about X percentage of your people just focused on R&D. Can we have them insourced into our side, right? So it depends on certain aspects of the business that people want to take in. Maybe not necessarily the whole 9 yards. So I think, like I said, so in a nutshell, it's co-joint twins. You can't have one without the other. I think that world is far gone. It's a space where both coexist for the benefit of both systems.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So moving to you, Kartick. There's no conference without AI and cybersecurity and cloud and all of that. So there are instances where organizations take decisions of a captive versus an outsourced model, primarily because their concerns on data security, data privacy, cyber issues, and wanting to do a business in an environment which is very closed, and therefore go the captive way. Do you think that that's the right model, or what's your thought on this?
That's actually a very interesting question, because the culprit here, or the keyword, is data, right? So what has happened in the last 15 years or so, if you see between captive and outsourced, kudos to the outsourced industry. They put in millions of dollars to become more InfoSec compliant, compliant to all the standards which exist. But what happened is data evolved. Data became the new wealth, right? So when the companies realized that, and behind this it became a cat and mouse game. The outsourced companies reinvent themselves, they became compliant, but the data is evolving at a very fast rate. An interesting statistic says that the data classification, which every company does, right? The speed of data classification in the last 5 years is 5x times. Which means, let's say when some work was outsourced, stating that it's a low risk work, right? Within 6 months to a year, it becomes moderate or high risk. So what happens for a captive who's actually monitoring, or the client who's monitoring this, they have to go all 9 yards to reinvent their compliance. And that's where the decision comes into play. Because the amount of work they need to put in to ensure that the outsourced vendor is compliant, that's where the difficulty comes in. And to add to that, there has been enough instances of data leaks, right? And given that data is the biggest wealth, there lies the question. The question then becomes, is it cost effective, or is it cost versus being non-compliant, right? And losing your own business. And that's where the decision making starts shifting as to what is it that we want to do. And interestingly, to add to this, given what Gyanesh was saying, I had a good hearty laugh at the way he introduced AI. So AI dosa, AI coffee, etc. Everything there is a AI, right, today. Everybody wants AI, whether it is required for their project, not required, but they want to see something about AI. And in the game of AI, again, if you see, in the last 4 or 5 years, a lot of BPOs, the bigger ones, smaller ones, they now have a technology wing. Why? Because it's not about what Steve is saying, it's not about SLAs anymore, right? It's about What value are you bringing to the table? And how do I add value if I cannot re-engineer, if I do not study, if I cannot innovate, if I cannot automate, right? But there, then the challenge becomes it's just an idea. Because for me to execute an idea, I need to touch your wealth, which is the data, right? So net, what's happening today is unless an outsourced organization is specializing, which we are seeing today, there are spin-offs happening. Larger companies are spinning off. There are quite a few examples in the last 6-8 months. They have spinned off healthcare as a separate unit. Why? Because then they can focus completely on the compliance of healthcare. Systems, technology, infra, physical security, info. So that's the way forward, but it's going to be a never-ending game. And as I see, the way data is moving, if outsourcing needs to keep its importance, we need to be much ahead, especially on info security. There cannot be any compromises. We have to be much ahead of the captives to stay in the game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great point, and can resonate because we've let go of many ecosystem partners because they were not like a SOC 2 or compliant and stuff like that. So very true. Okay, we take 1 or 2 audience questions. If there are any burning questions that anyone has, just to make it a little interactive. Yes, sir.
While we are talking about AI implementation globally, I'm sure I don't think the whole talent, global talent, will be aligned with the AI skill set. So, of course, if we look into the talent, there will be some talent who will be equivalent to the AI, and some talent may be a little bit lower than the AI. So, what about that talent who are actually not suitable to the AI skill set? So, how do we see that that workforce?
Yeah. So, anyone wants to take that?
So, I think, one of the things that I keep telling people is that AI is here to stay. Technology is always going to start making the easier job simpler, right? You've got to keep upgrading yourself. If you're not upgrading yourself, then, you're going to get stuck. In my view, in my point of view, if you look at it, populations are starting to shrink. Technology is starting to increase. Different kinds of other work is starting to come in. The way I look at it is, the problem that I foresee in the future is not necessarily a job shortage problem, but a human capital problem. The only way it can be addressed is people upgrading themselves. And like, for example, I think Tanmay said that his organization is investing about, $1 billion into, upgrading skills. All organizations, I think, are focusing on that aspect because that's the only way forward. If you don't upgrade people, machines will very easily take over the simpler transactional jobs, and then, the landscape will be very different.
Anyone else wants to add?
Yeah, see, another interesting viewpoint to this is, unlike, let's say, 15, 20 years back, technology today is infused, right? So upskilling is much faster, much easier. It's much easier for you to understand the emerging technologies and upskill yourself. If you go back 15 years, any new technology, the time to learn was much higher. Then the channels to learn was much difficult to reach. But given, technology has enabled us to do it simultaneously. Today, let's say whatever you want to learn or upskill yourself, there are multiple platforms, multiple channels available. And because of the way technology is getting infused, because of, let's say, IoT or because of, your mobile phones, it's much easier to pick up and understand what this technology is actually offering and how do I actually upskill myself to deliver on that.
I just want to add one perspective there. I think very good question. I was just answering the same kind of a question yesterday in one of my solutions. The specific question which was asked in the solution was, basically, what are you doing from the technology aspect and the new gen technology to retain the talent, right? See, we hire people who are college grads, both from commerce background, science background, and in some cases where it is content management or something like that, even from the arts background, right? But these guys who are just passed out in 2 years or 3 years maybe, for them the Gen AI might not be the newest thing which happened at that point of time, because currently in the last 1.5 years is the one where the trend is picking up, and it has already picked up. So what the required necessary skill set to develop them is, within the organizations, there are many courses which are embedded, And in some of the organization, for that matter, in my own organization, these learnings have made as part of the yearly KPIs. Unless and until they complete some bit of their knowledge acquisition from the new gen requirement, or it could be anything, right? It could be AI, it could be RPA, it could be some platform or anything of that sort, depending upon the interest the people have. They need to pick up something and they have to learn. Unless and until they learn it and they get that certified, so they will become outdated within the organization itself. So it is important that they gain that knowledge and stay relevant to the market and be in the market, not only in the same organization, they would be exploring outside. If they have to explore outside, obviously their resume should be thick and strong. So all these factors coming into picture, I think it is important what he rightly said, they need to upgrade and they need to be relevant to the market.
If I could just add one other thing from an operations perspective, and I think this is something that we're starting to talk about a little bit in operations, but we do need to consider more, is as tech-enabled automation becomes more and more complex, more prevalent, is able to take on more complex tasks, we have to figure out how we can best upskill our early joiners to our firms. Because the kind of work that those folks would typically have come in and done will no longer be done, and the kind of work that we have within our firms will immediately be more complex, will be more client-facing, will be heavier touch, and we'll be managing things that maybe the evolved technology hasn't quite got there to do. So we're going to have a gap, and that's going to ultimately result in a longer time frame from onboarding to ready, but also a different process that we're going to have to take with the graduates that are going to come into our firm, the interns who are coming into our firm. They're not going to be looking at manual instructions. They're not going to be looking at filling out forms. We need to do a little bit of soul searching to figure out how we upskill those folks so they can continue to build on that career trajectory without that initial step that a lot of us would have taken.
Yeah, okay, thank you. We'll just take one more question. Yeah.
I think, I think Tanmay, you have done a fantastic job along with the fellow panelists, and the session was really insightful.
Thank you.
So my question is that, and it's always debatable captive versus outsourced, just like it's always debatable augmentation versus replacement when it comes to Gen AI taking the jobs or giving the jobs. So my question is, keeping the EX and CX as the center points of business, what role do you see the training, the human-led and AI-assisted training will play when it comes to any segment, be it captive or outsourced? Because this is something which is a support function, and in the subcontinental mindset, people look at it as a revenue center and rather as a cost center, and instead of looking at it as a revenue center. I know that Josh and team, they are doing fantastic job, and rather they are also expanding their training team. I know about Noor and team that they are investing heavily in training, but how do you see the future of it?
Yeah. So in hindsight right now, if you look at before, right, the department itself, the learning and development department, just in India were about 140 of us. Right now we have dropped it down to 70. Doesn't mean that the business has stopped. In fact, the business has quadrupled. And that's purely because the way of learning has changed, not because we wanted to change it, but because the learners are asking for a different way to learn new things, right? They don't want to listen to an individual stand there and train them, right? The era of instructor-led training has reduced. Having said that, to your point, it completely depends on what's the skill set that I'm training. Is that something that can be completely automated, or do we need to have human intervention for that? Right now, we are running a project where I'm reducing the overall training, facilitator-led training, to just 30% from the current 100%, right? And the 30% continues to be there when you're training someone on emotional intelligence, building sales mindset, critical thinking, right? These elements is something that you can, of course, create a concept, tell them, hey, these are the concepts, but it can never be practiced without a facilitator sitting in there with them and helping them, coaching them continuously. So I think as organizations, we need to understand and certify that the learning and development team is there for a reason, on certain skills that can be developed and has to be developed through human intervention, and AI and automation, no matter how experienced, at least now I'm talking about the next few years, I don't know how it will be in the future, at least at this stage, it will not be able to replace that element for sure.
Anyone else? You want to add? Okay.
I'd like to just make a couple of points. AI was created by human, by the man. It can make it or break it, again, by, their own self. But I think, combining some of the statements or the pointers that other leaders have made, being relevant and being skilled will always help you. AI definitely is there, to stay, as we know. One of my processes that I handle for my clients, my people, my team members, relied on AI for certain responses, and my client was not very happy because their customers were not very happy. They wanted a human touch. They wanted that empathy coming out in those conversations or those listening skills. As much as AI is definitely more or less equivalent in terms of responding, but I think as people, as customers, as clients, we are able to figure out and identify, is it a machine that is, listening to us or responding, or is it a human? I think the human element will always be there. Yes, the certain percentage might have reduced, but it may not necessarily go away completely.
So you're hearing that it's still evolving. My take, see, the content, there is no dearth today. It's the hunger to learn, that's what is required. And second, we are already working, and me and my manager were discussing, how do we create AI coaches? So AI coaches who will be individual coaches. Today, as humans, we don't coach our teams as much because we're busy in so many other things. How can an AI be an assisted coach? So it will evolve. It is evolving. There was one last question here.
My question is, with the change in landscape in last...
Just a little louder.
Hello? Is it better? Yeah. With the change in landscape in the BPO industry in the last 20 years, how do you decide where your BPO should reside? Whether it should be, say, a US-based company, it should be in US itself, or say you still outsource in a country where it's much cheaper. How do you decide that? With the invent of AI, you might not need so many people.
So I'll start with that a little bit, and I'll go into some pretty dull practicalities. So when we look, and we're constantly looking at the right sites to do our business in. Obviously, there's a significant consideration given to geography. And when I say geography, we're not necessarily always talking about the same geography as where our clients are, but a geography which supports the kind of business that we want to perform. So where we have a solid geopolitical situation, so we don't have political threats to our ongoing operations. Mostly where we have a stable utilities situation, so that we have the essentials that we need to perform our business on a day-to-day basis. And also where we can find talent. And that is both talent at the graduate level, so where we have a really strong pool of young folks who want to enter into the industry and be trained up by us, but also where there's a broader pool of talent. And we can leverage from that pool and really help strengthen our ranks where we need to go and select from the market. Now, you'll see a variety of that, as I tell you, where we have operations in India. So we have Bangalore, strong talent, strong utilities, less good traffic, but we won't go there. We have Chennai, ticks a lot of the boxes. Sometimes we don't get the weather that we need and we have some flooding. We've got Hyderabad, really great growing site. We've got Mumbai, a little bit too expensive, but a really strong base as well. We also have Coimbatore. And Coimbatore, we have pros and cons in Coimbatore because we have a strong graduate platform. We're the only globally significant financial institution in Coimbatore. We have very low attrition. However, if we want to start to cherry pick expertise within the region, we can't. So you're never going to get the perfect site, and that's just India. If I went globally, I'd be here all day, but that's just India. But that kind of gives you a flavor on the things that we look at when we're trying to make those selections.
Yeah, I'll just very, very quickly come in. So it also kind of, for example, us as an organization, we've got offices or, centers set up in almost 20 states across the country. So what it does is, one is it gives me, skill set / talent pool availability. Number two, for example, if a customer has a cost preference, then I can give him an option tier 2, tier 3. Number three, for example, if you're doing a lot of work in the telecom space, right, each circle caters to specific languages. I get language, accessibility. Now, while that's just for the India market, the same thing can be extrapolated to the global market as well. So from that perspective, it kind of, I think the one key thing, and Robert made a very good point, I think the one key thing that a lot of companies look at is geopolitical stability. I think if that piece is okay, then everything else kind of starts to come together.
Yeah, and just to close, see, I think if your point, IBM, when they were making a presentation today, they said by 2026, 50% or more, I don't remember the percentage, will be digital workforce. Now, if it's a digital workforce, it's place agnostic. It's clearly place agnostic. Okay, I know there's a bell gone, and just to conclude, I would like to thank all the panelists for this wonderful discussion. And I think there is no one right answer. Every large BPM provider like Infosys, TCS, Wipro, we all have a GCC arm which supports GCCs. There are ecosystem players, and everyone has its own right. And I think the success of this ecosystem working well, so, just about 2 days back, there was a NASSCOM GCC conference in Hyderabad. Today, as we speak, or yesterday in Bangalore, there is a SSON conference dedicated to only captives. If what we spoke about today is really happening, then those conferences will not be just captives or GCCs, but an ecosystem of players who all come together to create the speed, value, and the environment that needs to be there. Yep. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Moderator Tanmay Agarwal and the remaining panelists. So, can we please have a huge round of applause for our moderators and panelists? To do the honors of felicitation, I would like to call upon Mr. Arumugam K, VP and Business Head Digital Transformation Services, Emphasis. I would like Mr. Arumugam to felicitate Mr. Robert Adair-Major. Can we have a round of applause for the gentleman, please? I request Arumugam sir to felicitate Mr. Joshua Sanath. Next, the felicitation to Ms. Noor Saba. Next, felicitation to Mr. Kartick Krishnamurthy. The moderator for this session, Mr. Tanmay Agarwal. Next to Mr. Stephen Ernest. And last but definitely not the least, Mr. Sathish Jampale. A round of applause for our moderator and panelists, ladies and gentlemen.